Hello, boys and girls. Today, I'm going to read you a story called The Beeman. Bees. There wouldn't be sunflowers, wouldn't be peas, wouldn't be apples on apple trees if it weren't for fuzzy, old, buzzy old bees dusting pollen from off their knees. The Beeman. Here is my grandpa, who's known in our town as the Beeman. Here is his jacket with zipped up hood that covers his face just the way that it should when he visits his hives as the Beeman. Here are his gloves made of cotton and leather, protecting his hands in all kinds of weather when he tends to his hives as the Beeman. Here is the beehive where all the bees sleep, tucked into a box called a shallow or deep, and then placed on a stand by the Beeman. Here is the smoker that quiets the bees, and a hive tool that opens the beehive with ease for a much closer look by the Beeman. Here is the queen bee, who does her job well and lays tiny eggs in a six-sided cell. She's the heart of the hive, says the Beeman. Here are the drone bees with big bulging eyes and a large appetite supporting their size. They mate with the queen, adds the Beeman. Here are the workers, 10,000 or more, who gather the nectar to bring back to the store. To bring back and store in honeycombed cells for the Beeman. There are the house bees with swift moving wings that dry up the nectar a worker bee brings, making honey for me and the Beeman. Here's the extractor. It's clickety-clack, removing the honey from frames on its rack and filling up jars for the Beeman. Here's some of the honey. Returned to the hive It's food for the bees to help them survive the long winter days near the Beeman. Here are the bees, protected from harm, inside the hive, huddled, cozy, and warm. So they'll be here next year, says the Beeman. Here is the wagon filled up to the brim with bottles of honey collected by him and brought to the house by the Beeman. Here are the muffins, all warm and delicious and dripping with honey on Grandma's best dishes. I'm glad that my grandpa's the Beeman. Here are some facts about bees. Bees, honeybees, belong to the insect family. They have 6 legs, 3 body parts, head, thorax, and abdomen, 2 pairs of wings, 2 antennae, and 2 compound eyes that let them see in all directions. A honeybee begins as an egg placed in a tiny cell by the queen. The egg hatches into a worm-like creature called a larva. The larva changes to a pupa, and hidden inside the tiny cell, the pupa turns into a honeybee. When it hatches, the bee is fully grown and ready to be a member of the colony. It takes about 3 weeks to go from an egg to a honeybee. Bee colonies. Honeybees live in large groups called colonies. A colony of honeybees has 1 queen, several hundred drones, and tens of thousands of workers. Drone bees are male bees. They have huge black eyes and plump bodies. They mate with the queen. They don't work inside the hive or collect nectar or pollen. The queen bee has a slender body and is longer than the other bees. She is also the mother of them. Her job is to lay eggs in spring's busy season. She lays between 1,000 and 2,000 eggs every day. Worker bees are female, and they have many different jobs. Sometimes they feed the larva and tidy up the hive, or they create wax and use it to make new cells. Sometimes they groom the queen and give her a rich protein food called royal jelly, or they protect the hive from enemies by standing guard at the entrance. Sometimes they leave the hive to gather nectar, pollen, or water. Their jobs depend on what the colony needs them to do. There are lots more in this book about honeybees, but I think that's enough for today. And look at the back of the book. Grandma's apple and honey muffins. I'll post a picture so that you can see, and maybe you'll make them with someone at home.